A man gets shot in the head and feels as if he was just reborn. The unknown man opens his eyes up and tries to remember what happened and senses someone nearby. A woman sees that he's up and greets him good morning while calling him Gamu Shoya. The man gets up and is shocked to hear her call him Shoya, and in a panicking voice asks what's going on. He calms down a bit and notices that she isn't a human and thinks that he has seen her before. The woman introduces herself as the demon Aramelina. Shoya gets angry thinking he's being toyed with, but his angry state just makes Aramelina find him cute. Aramelina asks Shoya if he wants to satisfy and reveals that she's a succubus and called so because she is too inviting to humans. Shoya backs away panicking. Aramelina presses that demons exist as the humans mention them a lot in their books and pulls out a book and reads some excerpts such as the basic definition of demons, questions about demons being harmful to humans, demons trying to put an end to progress of mankind, and them being regarded as non-physical spirits, and comments that only half of it is right. She touches Shoya's forehead and divulges that as she's a demon she can use magic and plans to use it to show him some images. Shoya sees that the Almighty One had to face an enemy that could use his weapons against him, so the Almighty One casted him from the divine heavens into a hell of unknown depths, making him get engulfed in infernal flames and burn like a falling star as he fell into the abyss of depths unknown where he would find no rest and no hope would ever come. Shoya is shaken by what he just witnessed, but it's business as usual for Aramelina, who tells him that he had died and is now reborn as Shuya, which confirms Shoya's suspicions about dying. Aramelina, the third greatest demon among Furiae, the goddess of revenge, offers Shoya the chance to make a contract with her and explains that her job is to collect souls and send them to hell because demons like her aren't made of flesh and bones, but instead from the particles they get from broken down human souls, so they must collect human souls, but unfortunately the powers they can use in the human world are quite limited, due to which they require a proxy to kill people and gather souls for them, and uses her powers to create weapons for Shoya from her hand. Demons are not allowed to directly meddle with humans, but they can make contracts and give powers to their patrons. In return for killing people for her, she offers him favors in proportion to what he gives and baits him with special abilities and information that only demons will have access to. Shoya gets up and thinks for a little while and asks if that information can lead him to his killers. Shoya wonders if he will later regret selling his soul to a demon, but he isn't the only one who is in the same situation. Later at home, Shoya doesn't like the way his little sister looks at him. Meanwhile, on the TV, a news is being broadcasted about the remains of a woman's body being discovered inside a deserted house in the Tokyo metropolitan area's Nakano district early in the morning on the 26th, with the police thinking that the suspect is Mio Kikuta, who was a student in the same district's high school and had gone missing 2 days earlier. Even though the identity can't be confirmed yet, an autopsy is to be conducted to find the cause of death. Furthermore, according to the Criminal Investigation Headquarters, the woman was found lying face down in the empty house with many cranial injuries resulting from being hit by a blunt object. Gamuriri, Suya's sister, feels that recently her brother has been acting weird. One day suddenly Shoya fell unconscious and was hospitalized for 3 weeks for some unknown reason which couldn't be cured, and then 1 week ago he just woke up and acted like nothing happened and is now sitting right in front of her. The doctor said that Shoya might be confused or have lost his memories during his coma, but Riri thinks that it wasn't the only thing that happened to him. Shoya cracks an egg for his natto and eats it without making a fuss, which Riri finds weird, as before the coma Shoya hated natto. Riri asks Shoya about pro wrestling, but Shoya asks her to talk after eating, which shocks her because in the past that would have gotten Shoya all pumped up, and he would have asked about any wrestlers she's interested in, and would have asked her to watch some of the World Pro Wrestling records he recorded or read some of his older magazines, and might have even taken her to Korea-Kuan Hall to watch a good match, and even back in elementary school he won't shut up about pro wrestling, so a reaction like this one isn't normal for Shoya. Riri has also notices that Shoya looks at news on the television with a scary look on his face, especially when it's about dangerous things like murder cases. She feels that Shoya completely changed after his hospitalization. Later at school, Shoya sits alone while everyone gossips about him losing his memories and debate if they should go talk to him, but worry about him snapping at them. Shoya sits alone when suddenly a woman appears from behind and grabs him tightly. She asks him if he lost his memories after his hospitalization, and if he forgot about Henmi Asana, her comrade in the pro wrestling fan club. Shoya apologizes and tries to remember the club. She reminds him that they had planned to be in the ring at Korakuen Hall, but Shoya dismisses her, saying he doesn't have time for that. Even Riri's classmates ask her about her brother's weird behavior, but they think that it's normal after losing your memories in a coma. But Riri thinks Shoya's is a completely different person now, and he even sneaks out late at night. Her friend comments that it's scary as recently some people have been murdered around them, which worries Riri, but to comfort her she adds that Shoya probably doesn't has anything to do with it. Later Shoya lies on his bed, but is unable to calm down. He looks around and can tell that the real Shoya was planning to become a pro wrestler and realizes that this body is better than his previous one. He has flashbacks of a wounded man being angry at his enemies and feels bad for Shoya as he has no interest in pro wrestling as there are things that he must do. Aramelina appears floating right above Shoya and informs him that the fallen Bible is missing, which shocks him. The book was taken by Riri, who is confused upon finding such a strange book in her brother's room and tries to open it, but is unable to do so because of its latch. Shoya suddenly appears behind Riri, scaring her. He simply takes the book and tells her to not take his book like that. Riri apologizes, but Shoya comforts her, saying it's fine. Shoya looks at Riri's collection of action figures and calls it strange. This reminds Riri that in the past, when others would bully her for having a Sentai hero action figures, her brother would come save her and defend her taste. But now Shoya can't even remember the action figures, which brings her to tears and scares her. Scared, she runs away as she just wants to get away from him. In the street, Riri wonders what to do and thinks about asking one of her friends to let her stay the night at their place. While walking, she doesn't notice a hooded guy creeping up on her. The man grabs her arm and drags her into an empty and dark alleyway. She sees that the man is armed with a hammer and realizes that it's the killer from the news and thinks that she is about to die now. The man swings and hits her in the head, once knocking her onto the ground. She spots her brother at the scene as she falls unconscious. The man tells Shoya that he's in his way and asks if he too is a killer. Shoya tells him to not lump them both together. The man tries to attack Shoya and swings his hammer, but Shoya dodges all his attacks and manages to smash him into the ground. Shoya pulls out his book and Aramelina unlocks the latch for him, giving him access to his weapons. As Shoya grabs his weapon and prepares to finish off the man, he recites some verses which the hooded man recognizes as Milton's Paradise Lost. Shoya is surprised that the man was aware of the words and finishes him off. The man's soul escapes his body, but Aramelina springs into action and gladly devours the soul, which pleases her. The two work together as Shoya deals with the living, while Aramelina devours their souls. Later in the hospital, Riri regains consciousness and finds Shoya sitting right next to her. Riri is confused and asks if they are in a hospital. Shoya reminds her that she was just assaulted by an attacker, but Riri is unable to remember anything. Shoya thinks that it must be because of getting hit in the head and is relieved that Riri didn't have the same memory loss as him. He tells her that the criminal who attacked her was also attacked later and met his end, but the police have no idea who did it. Riri says that it was Shoya, but he dismisses her, saying he was worried for her, so went out to look for her and found her lying on the street. He puts her action figure beside her and apologizes for his earlier behavior and comments that it's fine for a girl to like Sentai heroes. He tells her to rest as their mom will be there soon. Riri thinks that even though her brother lost all of his memories and appears to be a completely different person, but still he remains her kind brother. Aramelina tells Shoya that Riri isn't understanding things properly as she is calling him her kind brother, but Shoya shuts her up. In his previous life, Shoya had never met his father, but that didn't bother him because he was blessed with a gentle mother and older sister. We see a flashback of his final moments as he saw some unknown figures towering over him while holding his relatives hostage. Shoya wakes up from his nightmare and thinks that he has already died once and his father had contracted a demon earlier, which is the reason he thinks he contracted Aramelina, who gives him information and power in exchange for him giving her souls. Shoya gets up and unlocks his book and looks at his weapons. Shoya got resurrected into the body of someone else who conveniently died at the same time as him. Now to search for his 4 killers, he's now working as a killer for hire under the name of Gamugoya. In an obscure construction plot, 3 people are being held hostage and seated in wheelchairs. The 2 older hostages are somewhat composed, meanwhile the young girl is bawling. Shimada, the aide of the young master of Kikumoto Danyu Group, introduces himself as a member of the Yakuza despite his appearances. He explains that there are many ways to dispose of a corpse, with dumping it in the sea and burying it in the mountains being the most famous ones, but there are other options too, such as melting or crushing the bodies, but it takes too long, and even after much effort, evidence gets left behind. They have decided to mix the corpses into the foundations of a building. Shimada asks them if they have ever seen the building of the foundation, but the hostages remain quiet. He looks at their faces and assumes that they don't know, so explains that after reinforcing the ground, a rebar structure is assembled on top of it. During this, you also assemble the mold to hold the concrete, and after that you have to go through a foundation bar distribution inspection process. But right now most of it is already done, and all that's left is to pour in the concrete, and the company working on the site is related to them, so they have the ox, so the hostages will be buried inside the foundation. It's not very simple, as they now have to cut the bodies into small pieces as the rebar has already been laid. They grab the older woman, who screams, pleading she will do anything, but Shimada smiles, saying her screams won't reach anybody as they are surrounded by under construction building. They end the woman's life and drain her body to make the rest of the process easier. Meanwhile, the two lookouts spot a person heading towards them. They try to stop him, but he doesn't listen and continues walking towards him. The man grabs one of the lookouts and starts fighting. This man is Shoya. Shoya grabs the other one and smashes him into the car's window and uses the car's door to beat him up. By now, the older woman, who was the information broker, and the old man who couldn't pay off his debts were already taken care of, and only the girl who took the Yakuza's money still lived. She cries, saying she didn't know who owned the money, but Shimada is unwilling to let her off easily. The girl cries, saying she needed the money, and as they were doing phone call fraud, she thought it would be an easy target. Shimada compliments her abilities, but says that he still needs to see his work to the end, and prepares to finish her off, but she tries to bargain, saying she can hack and also do cosplays, and offers her body, but Shimada isn't interested, as he only likes it when he beats his 12-year-old adopted daughter. At that moment, the girl sees Shoya and Aramelina standing atop the unfinished building. Shoya jumps down, guns blazing, and begins picking off the Yakuza members. Now only Shimada remains, who also draws his weapon, and a firefight ensues between the two, with Shoya emerging victorious as he's the last man standing, but he too is wounded. Aramelina heals him completely, but he still feels the pain, at which Aramelina comforts him that he's alive, which is a wonderful thing. Shoya asks Aramelina what he should do with the girl. Aramelina smiles and tells him to not leave any witnesses, which scares the girl. Aramelina is surprised that the girl can see him, at which she thinks the girl might be of some use. Shoya asks about her, and she reveals she is Otachi Kururi, a hacker and cosplayer. Shoya asks why the Yakuza wanted to kill her, and she explains that she had hacked their computers and stole their money, which pleases Aramelina. Shoya asks Kururi why she took the money. At first, she remains quiet, but answers that she needed the money to do 100 gacha pulls in a game, which makes the two disappointed. Kururi changes her story, saying her mother is sick. Aramelina judges her to be a liar and a piece of trash, at which Shoya decides to finish her, but Kururi cries, saying she'll do anything to live. Shoya pauses for a second and offers her a test of her hacking skills. If she passes it, then he'll protect her from the Yakuza. The next day, Kururi appears as a transfer student and is glad to be there. The test was for her to use her hacking skills to fabricate her personal information to transfer to his school. Seeing Kururi succeed, Shoya gets impressed. Later, Kururi, trembling from fear, stands in front of Shoya and Aramelina and asks that as he called her behind the school building, so does needs to do some naughty stuff, but this question disgusts Shoya and asks her what kind of person she thinks he is. Kururi replies that he's a hitman contracted to a naughty demon, which Aramelina finds rude. Kururi asks her if she isn't like that, to which Aramelina hugs Shoya and answers that she is good with those things too. Aramelina asks Kururi why she wasn't so surprised when she saw her and accepted the existence of demons so easily. Kururi explains that ever since she was a kid, she could see many bizarre things like ghosts and yokai. Shoya cuts her off and hands her a drive containing data about the suspect in a murder case, and explains that the suspect is an underling in a crime syndicate who surrendered himself in place of someone higher up, and he wants to find who's pulling the strings behind the incident. Kururi gets excited as she feels like she is in a foreign drama, but Shoya asks if it isn't impossible for a hacker like her, and warns her, saying if she won't do it, then he won't save her from the Yakuza when they come for her next time either, and Aramelina will eat her soul, which scares her very much. At this, she agrees to do it and goes off to do her work, but stops and asks about the relationship between Shoya and Aramelina. Shoya explains that even though he is called Gemu Shoya, he is a completely different individual. Aramelina adds that the real Gemu Shoya made a contract with her in which she granted his one wish, and in exchange he offered her his soul, due to which only the empty shell of Shoya remained, but a new contract was formed according to which Shoya's body was taken over by him. He had been killed once and talks about the final moments of his old life. 4 men had tormented him, his mother and sister, because his father had taken a loan from them. The man kills his mother because she is of no use to them, which enrages Shoya, who swears revenge, saying he's remembered their faces and voices, but the man isn't scared as he hits Shoya in the head. Shoya dies and feels his body getting heavier and thinks he's falling down, but he remembers the 4 men and how his mother was killed while his sister was taken away, and doesn't want things to end this way, but thinks he can't do anything, when suddenly he spots someone coming to pick him up and thinks it's an angel, but it was Aramelina. He woke up in Shoya's body and sees Riri by his side, who gets happy seeing her brother wake up and hugs him. To get his revenge, he had formed a contract with Aramelina. He will end the life of lots of evil people and offer them to Aramelina. After taking over Shoya's body, he has sold his soul to her and become killer for hire, so Kururi has no way to escape them. Shoya returns home and is greeted by his little sister, who prepared lots of tasty food for him. She reminds him that it will be his turn to cook dinner tomorrow. Shoya compliments his sister, which flusters her. Later, Shoya asks what the real Shoya wished for in exchange of his soul. Aramelina explains that Riri had an incurable genetic disorder and had only a few more years to live, and as she was looking for a young, tough body at that time, she cured Riri's illness in exchange for the real Shoya's soul, after which he took over Shoya's body, which makes him think that the real Shoya was a decent man. At night, Kururi had managed to find the masterminds behind the incident and warned Shoya that they have guards following them all the time, so barging right in would be faster but also risky, but Shoya doesn't care and jumps into their room through a window and starts ending their lives without hesitation. Shoya has truly become a killer for hire by selling his soul to a demon. While playing his video game, he remembers some moments of his old life before he was resurrected as Shoya Gamu. He expressed his desire to be a streamer, at which both his mom and sister supported him and offered him some advice and agreed to get him a good computer on his next birthday or Christmas. He stops playing because the more he remembers his old life, the bigger his desire for revenge becomes. The next day in his school's pro wrestling club's practice room, Shoya asks President Damon to contact spar with him for a while, to which the president immediately agrees. Izana talks to the president about Shoya missing a lot of drills, but the president recognizes that Shoya hasn't been neglecting the fundamentals, but ever since he got discharged from the hospital, his aura has changed. Izana agrees, saying that the old Shoya would talk about his love for pro wrestling all the time and wonders what happened to him and if he has any issues to deal with. Later, Kururi gives Shoya data on his next target by using a USB, at which Shoya asks to share information via email, but Kururi declines, saying it'll be dangerous as police are very good at finding things online. Unknown to the two, Izana is secretly listening to their conversation and wondering what Shoya is doing with the new transfer student. Kururi had put her cosplay pictures on the USB as camouflage and pleads him to not leak them, at which he calls her an idiot. Hearing all this, Izana thinks the two are talking about naughty stuff, so to keep him from going down the wrong path, she decides to tell Riri about all this. Aramelina notices Izana spying on Shoya, but lets her go, thinking that it will make things more fun for her. Later at night, Shoya is choosing who his next target will be. He uses internet, newspaper, and shady sites to gather information via any means he can and chooses targets. Then Aramelina will measure the guilt and value of the soul and sets the priorities. Once it's decided that the target is worth killing, Kururi gives him further information about the target. Upon inserting the USB, the first thing that Shoya finds are Kururi's pictures, which annoys him as he tries to find case information. Suddenly, his little sister Riri enters the room, at which he panics and quickly slams the laptop shut so Riri doesn't seize anything. Riri asks Shoya what he was doing, at which he shouts at her to knock before coming into his room, which annoys her. Shoya got into trouble because of Kururi, but the information she gave is very accurate. 4 days ago, a hitman, Tabuchi Yuzo, had ended the lives of 3 Yakuza members. The man is already over 50. 20 years ago, he had killed 3 people at the behest of the group's leader, and after finishing his sentence as a model prisoner, he was promised the rank of lieutenant, but his group had been finished a long time ago, and he couldn't do anything other than killing people. Aramelina suggests dealing with him before he hurts any more people. Yuzo had used an automatic rifle on his last target and used spray and pray tactics from his moving car. Even in Japan, it's pretty easy to get a hold of guns, but using them makes the police very serious. Melina points out that an old hitman with no future won't think about the fallout of his actions, so they can't predict what he's planning, so Shoya has no choice but to end him. He thinks that the man's weapon should be in the passenger seat, so he needs to finish it before he can grab it. He runs towards the man's car and gets on top of it and starts attacking through the windshield before Yuzu has any chance to react and quickly ends the fight. Later, Shoya locks his weapons in his book, while Melina tries to get reception for Hell's radio waves. Melina congratulates Shoya for exceeding the quota of the number of souls sent to Hell, as that lets him unlock all sorts of perks. Shoya asks about them, and Melina explains that she's already lent him some of her abilities like physical strengthening, regenerative abilities, suppression for his weapons, and protective barriers. She happily pulls out a scroll, tells him that depending on the number of bad guys he sends to Hell, he can get abilities from the skill tree. Right now, he can only unlock 3 basic skills, which are short jump teleportation, cell regeneration enhancement level 1, and mental power bullet level 1. But that's not all. Because of Shoya's contributions, he has gained access to a part of HellNet, which is Hell's own information network, which will give Shoya clues about the people who ruined his old life. Melina gives Shoya the good news that she's found out the name of one of them and explains that he's a former sumo wrestler and goes by the name Clobbering Mountain and is a top-level cover-up agent. Sometimes when a politician, fighter, or an entertainer suddenly gets hurt, they would lie and say that they fell down. All of that's Clobbering Mountain's work. He also silences those who may talk too much without any mercy and disposes of bodies that shouldn't be found. He deals with things that are inconvenient for people. Because of Clobbering Mountain, the police aren't investigating his family's case. If they find their names, then all that they will have to do will be to end them, but before that, Shoya, filled with a desire for revenge, decides to inflict terrible pain upon them. Clobbering Mountain enjoys some meat while some guards are there. Shoya sees the man through his binoculars and trembles with anger as he recognizes him as the person who had his way with his mother. Karuri is also there and lets them know that the entire building has been rented by Clobbering Mountain, who will probably use it for dirty work. Shoya asks her why she's in her cosplay outfit, at which she whines that it's because Shoya called her quickly, so she didn't have a chance to change. Shoya tells Karuri to stop complaining and support him from the rooftop and readies his weapons. Melina warns Shoya that their target isn't an average human, as she can feel some magic coming off him. Shoya asks if the man sold his soul to a demon, but Melina doesn't sense any demons, and his presence is of someone who can use magic despite being a human, and such people are called as violators. Shoya asks if their target is immune to bullets, at which Melina tells him that the fight will be difficult. She has given him her blessing, but even that has its limits, so if he takes too much damage, then she won't be able to do anything for him, at which he smiles, saying he isn't an idiot who thinks about losing even before the fight begins, and asks if she's worried about him. She explains that he's her partner and has skilled allies, and himself is strange, as despite being together for 2 months, he's the first contractor to not go for her body. Meanwhile, Clobbering Mountain is confronted by 3 men who are angry at him. Mountain greets Sahara and says that as Sahara is running a small mixed martial arts crew and holding matches overseas and using it as a cover to make secret routes to sell drugs, he has a request from Kanto's strongest family, the head family, to take care of Sahara. Sahara gets angry and shouts that he isn't scared of him, but Mountain laughs and says that he won't kill him. Instead, he will just beat them all up. The fight begins, and Sahara's bodyguards try to attack Mountain, but he dodges them and sends them flying with a single punch, and makes short work of them. He punches Sahar once, which drops him onto the floor. He grabs Sahara by his hair and presses his face against the hot stove, and explains that he's only doing all of these things because people don't have a say in their calling and simply do whatever they can. Shoya decides that now is his chance to make a move, but Melina stops him as she spots 2 women walking on the street below them. The smaller women take a shell from her bag and takes out her weapon and loads it. The 2 enter the building, but the guard is only able to see the younger girl. He tells her to go away, but she points her weapon at his face, which he mistakes as a toy, but he immediately gets blown away. At this moment, Shoya remembers that those 2 are the same as them, a demon and contractor pair, and their prey is the same as Shoya's, which makes him worry that the unknown pair may kill Mountain before they can get any information out of him. Shoya had previously planned to sneak in from the parking plot, but now he has no choice. In the elevator, the young girl asks her demon rider for a guardian kiss, and the 2 satisfied is set her bulletproof protection. She reaches the floor with Mountain, and the moment she steps out of the elevator starts ending everyone. Mountain hears the commotion and decides to hide and leaves the place to his men. The men ready themselves for a fight. At this moment, Shoya in his normal style smashes into the room through the window. There is utter chaos as both Shoya and the young girl engage in a firefight against Mountain's men. Using the fight as cover, Mountain takes his time to take his weapon out of its hiding spot and prepares to step into the fray. Both Shoya and the young girl stand surrounded by defeated enemies, take aim at each other as they realize that they both are hired killers. Shoya, seeing that Riri is getting suspicious of him, thinks that even though she won't realize that someone else is inside her brother's body, he should still act as close to the old Gemu Shoya as he can, and asks Riri how he was like before he fell unconscious with the excuse that he doesn't remember much. Riri explains to Shoya that he loved pro wrestling a lot and would get excited at the mere mention of it, and he hated natto but now he's fine with it, which Shoya explains as his taste buds changing because he fell unconscious. Riri also adds that before eating, Shoya would say thanks for the muscles. Isana, upon learning that Shoya got amnesia after falling unconscious and seeing that pro wrestling doesn't make him excited anymore, thinks that it's very serious now and decides to give him shock therapy to try to return his memories. Isana lies and asks Shoya if he remembers ever confessing his love to her, which comes as a shock to him. Isana, thinking that the therapy is working, gets others to do the same to him. The captain, Tanaka, and other club members do the same trick on Shoya in hopes of returning his memories. Clobbering Mountain runs around with his gun in his hand as he's decided that he wants to teach his attackers a lesson. The young girl wants to get back to fighting, but Shoya doesn't want to end his life there and curses her, which makes her mad at him. The demon with her introduces herself as Ryderk, a third-class greater demon in service of the evil temptress Tentatoris Meridini. Ryderk is pleased to see Armelina, but Armelina acts cold towards Ryderk. Shoya asks Armelina what happened between her and Ryderk. Armelina hates Ryderk's hobbies because her favorite snack is the soul of women who've lost their husbands. Ryderk defends herself by saying that there's no right or wrong in a demon's vocabulary and points out that Armelina herself loves vengeful spirits. Shoya tries to stay away from the two demons' discussion and tells the girl that he has unfinished business with Clobbering Mountain and his family's safety, and his revenge depends on it. The girl remains indifferent, and she too is after Mountain because he's her only lead for the person she's looking for. Suddenly, Clobbering Mountain appears, and seeing that there are two hitmen contracted to demons, opens fire at the two of them, but both of them are able to duck into cover and try to return fire, but for some reason their guns aren't able to fire. Mountain raises his hand, and Armelina can see the glowing seal on his hand and recognizes it as Solomon's demon, Duke of Gehenna, Birth's alchemy. The girl takes out a shotgun shell and sees that it's turned into pure gold. Mountain is able to use demonic powers without making a demon contract, which makes Armelina realize that Mountain is a violator who stole a portion of a demon's power. Shoya checks his bullets too, and they also have been turned into gold, so both of the hitmen put their guns away. Mountain explains that changing bullets into gold with sorcery is his specialty, and adds that he can do the same to detonators and gunpowder. A 9mm bullet for a handgun weighs 8 grams, and 24 gold sells for 5,000 yen per gram, and the girl's shotgun shells weigh 20 grams each, so if all of their bullets turned into gold, they would be able to earn a lot of money, and so ask Mountain to keep up his skill, but Mountain calls them stupid as if his power was that limitless, he would be living the good life. Mountain uses his technique to deal with gun-wielding opponents, as it creates a window good enough for him to get close to his enemy to deal with them with his bare hands. Shoya and the girl don't understand what Mountain is blabbering about. Mountain asks them if they think they can win despite such a difference in body weight. The girl scoffs as she's tired of him talking about weight difference, which only matters in sports matches due to the rules, but this is a real fight, and adds that it doesn't matter how much muscle a person has, they won't be able to remain standing after a hit at their jaw at the right angle, and leverage is all that matters, because as the neck anchors the head, the brain will get damaged as it crashes to the top of the skull, and the recoil will cause a contralateral injury resulting in a concussion. She also explains that the area below the nose and the upper lip is a weak point, as being hit there will cause the impact to affect the trigeminal nerve via the maxillary nerve, resulting in facial palsy, and as it's a structural issue with the human body, Mountain will be brought down despite his weight. Mountain looks down at her and says that she can't hit his pressure points, and it doesn't matter what they do as long as there is a weight difference, they won't be able to beat him. Shoya has had it with the talking and says to begin the fight. The girl tries a sneak attack and uses her foot to grab a knife lying on the ground and throws it at Mountain, but he uses his arm to absorb the hit. The girl then kicks Mountain at a weak spot on his leg, which makes it wobble. Seizing this chance, Shoya joins in the fight and lands a flying kick at Mountain's stomach, making him fall down. The two seeing Mountain on the ground think that the fight went too easy, but suddenly Mountain gets up and grabs Shoya and smashes him into the furniture there before Shoya can do anything. The man then grabs Shoya's arm and breaks it. The girl kicks Mountain, but her foot lands directly on the man's face and misses his pressure points. The man uses his chance to grab her leg and smashes her onto the ground. Shoya curses Mountain as he violates women after beating them up, which surprises Mountain as he can't figure out why Shoya knows that. Shoya then remembers the final moments of his old life as he saw Mountain doing the same to his mother. Mountain did that because destroying someone's dignity makes him mentally stronger. Shoya stands up to fight Mountain, but Mountain doesn't think that Shoya is a threat as his arm is badly injured, but Shoya isn't worried about his arm as Armelina will heal it later. The girl, seeing Mountain is distracted, quickly gets up and attacks him with her legs and hits his pressure point. Shoya, despite his broken arm, charges at Mountain, who swings to hit him, but Shoya dodges the attack and grabs the knife stuck in Mountain's arm and uses it to strike him in the neck. Even the knife breaks as it gets lodged in Mountain's neck. Mountain tries to stand but is unable to do so and falls on the ground. Shoya gets mad at him not dying, and Armelina explains that a violator won't die until his demon's crest, which is the source of his power, gets destroyed. Shoya in his anger strikes Mountain with his gun over and over and gets revenge for his mother and continuously beats Mountain up in his rage until Mountain ends himself because he couldn't bear the pain that Shoya was inflicting on him. Mountain's demonic power begins leaking from him. Even though Mountain is no longer breathing, Shoya still beats him up and stomps his face. The girl stops Shoya by throwing a piece of meat on his face and gets mad at him because Shoya ended Mountain before they had a chance to interrogate him. Ryder suggests taking Mountain's soul to hell for interrogation. Shoya and the girl are surprised that demons can do something like that. Armelina adds that it'll take time and effort, but as they're already dead, there isn't a better option available. Armelina sucks Mountain's soul, and as Shoya searches the body for clues, the girl adds that she also has things she needs to do and asks if Shoya will keep the information to himself. Shoya replies that as they both aren't going to kill each other, he will share the information with her. She pauses for a bit and introduces herself as Teki Kaname, and Shoya also introduces himself to her. Kaname warns Shoya that clobbering Mountain was backed by the Kanto group, which despite the authorities' best efforts is still rapidly expanding, so he should watch out for his surroundings. Outside the building, a man with his demon stands disappointed. The demon points out they missed everything, which angers the man. Later, Shoya lies in his bed, and Armelina remembers that when Shoya was fighting clobbering Mountain, the hatred during the fight made Shoya's soul shine so dazzlingly, so she wants him to torment her, but she has to wait until he decides to violate her. Meanwhile, Riri dreams about her brother beating up a guy and then getting close to her, but her dream is interrupted by Shoya knocking on her door, who tells her that Mom has made breakfast for them. Riri shouts at him for knocking on the door so suddenly. Shoya walks away confused if she would have liked it better if he barged in. Armelina watches Riri and thinks that she got affected by her demonic powers and feels it might come in handy. In Shoto, Shibuya Ward lies the Kanto Group HQ. The Kanto Group is a Yakuza gang established in Tokyo. They have 5,000 members, but if you include their associate members, then their total numbers go beyond 10,000. The group carries out all kinds of illegal activities and has bases overseas and are Japan's largest criminal organization. The Kanto Group's underboss, Kawamata Daosetu, gets out of his car and is greeted by many of his underlings. Daosetu has a meeting with his chief, Makabe Ryoichi Makabe, and advisor Yamamoto Ban. They are worried that they are being targeted because of the losses that they have just suffered, particularly that of clobbering Mountain, so they decide to have the Aragami Group deal with attackers, but there is disagreement as the Aragami Group aren't decent, as they fed 20 members of a Kabuki-cho street gang to the pigs while the men were alive, and they slaughtered all the detectives who were investigating them, and they got lucky that there was no evidence left. But as there's still time till the old man's ritual finishes, Daosetu wants to deal with any trouble as soon as possible. Clobbering Mountain's body is floating when suddenly he gets struck by multiple chains that immobilize him. Ryder greets him and lets him know that she's brought his soul down to hell. Mountain gets mad at her and tells her to not mess with him, but she laughs, saying as he's just a soul now, it won't matter what she does to him, he won't be able to escape like before, and uses her powers to cause pain to him. Ryder wants Mountain to tell him things like who his friends are and how he acquired powers. Later at the high school's roof, Kururi lets Shoya know that she had a look at clobbering Mountain's phone and found out that he was connected to the Kanto Group and the Aragami group is their special forces, and she has heard rumors that the Aragami group will soon make their move, and she's working on the details, but knows that the Aragami group are a crazy bunch. Shoya decides to deal with the Aragami group as he still has 3 enemies, and he'll be glad if he came met them. Shoya gives Kirumi his bullet that Mountain had turned into gold as compensation. Kururi sighs as she's being worked to the bone, and this time her mission is very dangerous. Suddenly, Asana grabs Kururi from behind, which scares Kururi, but Asana calms her down and introduces herself and reveals that she's noticed her and Shoya talking in secret a lot and asks if they are going out together. Kururi panics and thinks to dig herself out of the situation and lies that the two of them whisper about cosplay and doubles down on it by saying that she and Shoya make costumes of their favorite characters and accidentally invites Asana to come to a cosplaying event with her. Meanwhile, Kanan gets greeted by a friend in her school who praises her for passing the external exam with flying colors. All the girls think of her as her role model, but she finally manages to catch a break in the toilet and feels that being in an all-girls school is very tiring. Suddenly, Ryderk appears through the stall door in front of Kanem. Kanem asks Ryderk if Clobbering Mountain gave up any information. She answers that Armelina is torturing Mountain right now, so even though violators don't talk much, it's only a matter of time before he caves. At night, a woman enters the building of the previous fight and takes a look around. This woman is Araki Shuko, the head of Kanto Group. The woman sniffs around, and even though there is no physical evidence, she is able to smell that there were demons involved in the whole situation. The Aragami head Araki Shoko enters and immediately gets hugged by Polina and Adriana, but she tells him that work will come first. The group's officers Midimlane Sound and Kakizaki Kaio along with the group's underboss Otori Jingo are also present. The Kanto organization's best enemy eradication unit is assembled and ready to get to work. The next morning, Shoya walks down the stairs and gets greeted by his mother and freezes up. His mother then asks if he has also forgotten her. Shoya realizes that he almost forgot of the real Shoya's mother, Gamuto Kiko. She thinks that it's because she has been busy with work, due to which she wasn't able to be at home much. Shoya apologizes and realizes that his real memories have begun fading away little by little, leaving behind only the rage. Tokiko hugs him tightly, which makes him question Shoya, but doesn't backs away, thinking it will draw suspicion. Riri also comes downstairs and Tokiko calls her too, saying they haven't had a sandwich hug for so long, and they both hug Shoya tightly. Armelina also enjoys the scene, but Shoya shoos her away. Later in the school's cafeteria, Riri and Asana are having lunch when Asana pulls out her phone and shows Kururi to Riri and lets her know that Kururi was flirting with Shoya. Asana describes Kururi to Riri as the type of girl who guys like, which angers Riri. Asana also says that Kururi is like an otaku, which makes Riri think that Kururi is the reason that Shoya has been acting strange recently and wonders if she influenced him. Riri asks if the two are going out, and Asana lets her know that Kururi denied it and invited her to a cosplay with her. Riri excitedly decides to also take a part in it, but Asana lets her know how dirty the cosplays are, which makes her blush. Later at night, Shoya trains hard with the punching bag but gets interrupted by Armelina, who gives him the good news that Clobbering Mountain spilled the beans. Armelina lets Shoya know that his 3 enemies are Kato-Paz, Chan Lewis, and Araki Shoko. Armelina puts Araki, the head of the Aragami group, because they got lots of information on her from Clobbering Mountain, so they should start from her. In a grim flashback, we get a glimpse on the childhood of Teki Kaname. Kaname was despised by her mother, who regretted ever giving birth to her and would get annoyed at the mere sight of her. She used to hurt her with cigarette and would keep inflicting pain upon her despite her begging for forgiveness. Kaname wakes up from the nightmare in despair and calls for Ryderk and hugs her and asks her to not leave her ever, and asks her where she went as it smells like home. Ryderk explains that her favorite food is the souls of widows, as she takes advantage of a widow's weakness and makes a soul contract with her and gives them wealth in exchange for pleasure. She doesn't take their souls immediately, but instead collects it over the years. Kaname doesn't want to hear any more and walks away. Kaname receives a message from Shoya that their next target will be the Kanto Group's Aragami gang, so asks Ryderk to help her in intel gathering. Later that night, the same man who missed out on all the action during the fight with Clobbering Mountain is finished giving an interview. This man is Ekinami Ryugo. Just as he finishes up, his demon floats into the room, which angers Ryugo, so he shoves his gun in the demon's mouth. Meanwhile, the Aragami gang is investigating the clues. San had managed to grab the bullets used from a policeman she knew. San takes off her glasses to take a sniff, and uses the power of Andromalius and is able to get that a young man and a young woman were present and that they both are hitmen who have sold their souls to demons, and hopes that she will be able to get better information after some more time. Shoko has decided to find the hitmen and make them pay for their misdeed. Meanwhile, at the men's iced tea, Milk Shoya enters in his usual getup. The guards see him on the cameras and confront him. They tell him to go outside, but he pulls out his weapons and attacks the two, which grabs everyone else's attention. A man tries to hide in the staff room, but Shoya gives chase and has him in his sights. The man threatens Shoya that they are under the protection of the Kanto Yakuza gang, but Shoya says that it's the only reason he is there. At the regional cosplay convention in the Cos Hospital venue, Shoya and the rest are wearing various costumes. Azana gets very excited as it feels just like a festival. Cos House events are easy for Riri to attend because they aren't strict about how much skin you can show. Shoya is in his usual hitman clothes and gives the excuse that he's cosplaying an assassin from a Hong Kong film. Kururi blurts out that Shoya is playing himself, at which he pulls her ears to teach her a lesson. Riri sees Kururi showing so much skin and acting carefree as Shoya has fun with her. This makes Riri jealous and she emits bloodlust, which scares the others there. Shoya is annoyed at having to come to the event despite being busy trying to gather information out the Kanto group and the Aragami gang. The previous day, when Shoya raided a location, he was trying to interrogate a person at gunpoint to get information about the Aragami gang's location and member count. But the man wouldn't talk, so to get the man to talk, Shoya targeted his foot and threatened his stomach and head, at which he caved in and told Shoya that Araki is the leader of the Aragami gang and their office is a former underground casino in Shibuya. After getting this information, Shoya ends the man's life. Melina tries to calm Shoya and says that it's important to appear in public in his disguise every once in a while, as it'll help deter any suspicion about being a hitman, even though it's unlikely that the police will suspect him. Melina adds that she too is having fun in the event, and she wouldn't stand out even if she showed herself to everyone, but Shoya stops her. Azana gets surrounded by fangirls who think she's a character from Strives, which is the most popular game right now. The girls compliment Asana's muscles and ask if she's a bodybuilder, but she corrects them, saying she's a pro wrestler. Kururi separates from the group to go to the booth and sell Uro, and so if they get tired they should come to her. Riri is surprised that Shoya is interested in things like that, but Shoya responds that he just got caught up in them. Riri suspects that Takechi had something to do with it, and Shoya admits that she was a factor. This annoys Riri, but Shoya is clueless. Suddenly, the male demon appears in front of Shoya, making him freeze. Riri asks him what's wrong, and Shoya says he's looking at the cosplayer right in front of him, but Riri can't see the man. Shoya replies that it was his mistake. The demon tells Shoya that only he and his demon and can see him, and lets him know that his contractor wants to speak with him. Shoya tells Kururi to go and wait at Kururi's booth and leaves, making the excuse that he has to use the bathroom. On the empty rooftop, Shoya and Melina meet the new demon and his contractor. The contractor introduces himself as Ekonami Kyogo, who was after clobbering Mountain for his own reasons, but by the time he made it to him, it was all over. Melina guesses that the demon is in the service of the imitator of miracles, Prestigiators. The demon tries to introduce himself, but Kyogo shuts him up and lets Shoya know that he's been following him ever since he dealt with clobbering Mountain. Shoya grows restless and tells Kyogo to speak what he wants to. Kyogo lets Shoya know that he has too many weaknesses, which makes Shoya angry. Kyogo asks Shoya if he has ever seen Bruce Lee's Enter the Dragon, in which the sister of the protagonist is murdered by the villain, and warns that the Aragami gang is closing in. Meanwhile, Riri is having some trouble trying to find Kururi's booth when San approaches her from behind and grabs her to head to a place with fewer people. Riri mistakes the woman for staff and follows her down an empty hallway and starts feeling uneasy. At the same time, Shoya and Kyogo are rushing downstairs because Kyogo has been watching Shoya for a long time, so knows that the Aragami gang is following them, as he's seen suspicious people around Shoya and suspects that they have ways to track traces of magic. Sound talks to her shadow that Riri stinks of magic, so she must be involved. Hearing this, Riri tries to get away but fails as the shadow transforms and grabs her, dragging her into the wall. Sound is able to sense the presence of demons and two hired killers, but the shadow, which is in reality Jingo, points out that they weren't expecting that many, at which Sane follows her orders, so decides to retreat for now. Shoya shouts for Riri in the crowd, but only gets silence in response and realizes that because of him, Riri has been caught up in the mess. Meanwhile, at her school, Kaname finds a love letter in her shoebox. She reads it and later meets with her friend who wrote the letter behind the school building. Sir, who looks down at Kaname and says that if Ryderk hadn't intervened, then she could have come to rest with Aiko. Kaname sees that the man is able to see and hurt Ryderk and realizes that he's a violator who uses magic. Kaname apologizes to the body of Aiko and gets mad at Hugh for hurting girls, but he doesn't consider gender in combat. Ryderk warns Kaname to watch her feet, but it's too late as she already gets bitten by a snake. She quickly throws away the snake, which then crawls up Shuko's leg. Kaname gets mad at Shuko, but isn't able to control her body and collapses to the ground. Shuko threatens Ryderk too. Meanwhile, at Karuri's place, Shoya and the rest are gathered. Shoya begs Karuri's help as his sister's life is at stake, and tells her to find the underground casino in Shibuya using the name Araki Shuko that Clobbering Mountain gave them. Karuri gets to work and searches with the keywords Shoya gave her and manages to find the place. Jingo and San walk with Riri as hostage, for which Shuko praises the pair and tells them to come back to the office as they'll be followed. They have also captured Kaname and Ryderk and have them tied up. Shuko interrupts Polina and Adriana as Torment comes first and asks them if the preparations are complete. The two have changed their captive's clothes and tied them up, and Ryderk has been tied using Samuel's snake to keep her from escaping. Shuko warns them that the bodies of demons are formed by the will of human souls, so they shouldn't let their guard down, and adds that even her wound will soon be healed. Ryderk is surprised that Shuko knows so much about demons, to which she responds that it's because she's a violator. There are laws in heaven and hell due to which humans can't receive powers without a price, which is why those who wield powers stolen from demons and angels are called as violators. Shuko explains that by performing magical arts using relics, they are able to harness the ability of saints and demons for themselves and use them not only for bindings but also employ barrier craft and talismans to keep demon eyes away. By embedding a demon's skin into his hand, Clobbering Mountain was able to use alchemy, but as he didn't have any education or a magical ability, that was his only skill. Ryderk adds that it is the reason Mountain is suffering in the afterlife, and Shuko will suffer the same fate. Shuko isn't interested, so plans to break a few bones to make sure that doesn't happen. Riri also wakes up but is blindfolded and has her ears covered and begins to panic. Kaname asks Shuko who the other girl is, which surprises Shuko, and she thinks that Kanon is just plain dumb and explains that the Riri is a family member of Shoya and she hasn't decided what to do with her, so has only covered her ears and eyes yet. Shuko has many things to ask Kaname, but she likes the look in her eyes and explains that her own father was also a Yakuza, so being raised in such a violent world has given her a good eye for people, so knows that Kanon is someone who's familiar with receiving violence. Shuko explains that even among elementary kids, those who are good at fighting get beat up by their parents a lot, and those who get injured badly by their parents have different eyes. Abused kids fall into two groups. They either get scared of violence or get used to it. Kaname's eyes show that she's in the second group. Kaname tells Shuko to get to the point. Shuko says that normal torment methods won't work on Kaname, so tells Adriana and Polina to get to work, who begin abusing Kaname's body and have her tied up. Shuko says she'll train Kaname and then become her parent. Shuko then grabs hold of Ryderk and lets her know that parts of a demon's body can be used as an evil relic, and as Ryderk can regenerate, she can take as many parts as she desired, and grabs pliers made of steel and enchanted in magic capable of destroying demons and uses it to take out Ryderk's tooth. The same is the case with the knife, which she uses to easily take Ryderk's ear. Shuko will harvest according to Ryderk's condition to make her suffer on Earth. Outside the building, Shoya and Kyogo scout the location. Shoya is mad at Riri being taken away from him because he doesn't want to lose any more members of his family, and so wants to make Shuko suffer. Kyogo asks Shoya if he has any weapons besides the 2 handguns, but Shoya is limited to those. Kyogo asks Shoya as he isn't upgrading after collecting souls, which puzzles Shoya. Shoya asks Aramelina if he can actually do that, and she explains that in the skill tree there is a section for weapon upgrades. Shoya decides to not worry about it as he wants to save Riri as quickly as possible. Kyogo is surprised that Shoya is actually worried for his sister despite being a hired killer who has sold his soul to demons, and normally most of them are depraved. Shoya points to Kyogo that he's also a hired killer, to which he agrees, saying he's also depraved, being relying on a demon, but that doesn't matter to Shoya, who'll be thankful to Kyogo if he helps him save his sister. Kyogo says that he's only after the man in the hat, Katoblepaz. Shoya wants to know why Kyogo is after that man, but they leave that discussion for another day. They decide to head into the building from the rooftop as they suspect traps at the front entrance. Before moving in, Shoya asks Aramelina for a favor. Meanwhile, Kaname and Ryderk are being violated by Shoko and her lackeys as Shoya cuts of Ryderk's tongue and feeds it to Kaname. As Shoya and the rest get atop the roof, Aramelina senses that a barrier is up with spells engraved everywhere. The barrier is to ward off other people and to ensure that gunshots and screams can't be heard from outside the building, which they find convenient. They decide to head into the building from the roof and get to the first floor before making their way to the underground casino. Inside the building, Hugh is enjoying his drink when suddenly Shoya and Kyugo come around the corner, guns ready, and just as they are about to attack Hugh, Shoya feels a presence on their side and spots an enemy attempting to attack them, but he is able to dodge the attack of the violator and returns fire, but it's ineffective and he's unable to read his opponent's movements as it gets away from him. Hugh now swings his blade only once, with which he cuts Kyugo's weapon into two. Hugh is using Kemetachi, which is a blade of wind, so he can't see the line drawn by the sword. Jingo now rises from the floor and gets into his hewn form. They had suspected that Shoya and Kyugo would take this path and were waiting to stop them. Seeing that they are up against a samurai and a ninja, Kyugo jokes that they may face a geisha next. The real fight begins now. Shoya tries to attack Jingo, but all his attacks miss. Jingo turns into a shadow to move around. Jingo appears behind Shoya as he is able to feel Shoya's doubt and anxiety and throws knives at him. Shoya is unable to dodge them, so uses his arm to absorb the attack to prevent severe damage. Shoya returns fire, but Jingo once again turns into a shadow to dodge. Shoya thinks his opponent is a magician and wonders how to defeat it. Aramelina lets Shoya know that their opponent is a violator who is using the powers of the demon Balam to conceal their human form inside the shadow, which stumps Shoya as you can't kill a shadow. Meanwhile, Kyugo is busy with Hugh, who launches an attack at him, but Kyugo sees it coming and dodges it, but sees that the attack is heading right for Shoya, but the attack falls just short and only smashes the bottle right behind him. Kyugo sees that the attack just barely missed Shoya. Polina and Adriana really enjoyed torturing Kaname and appeared to have gotten high from it. Shuko gets near Ryderk and threatens to tear her heart out, as demon hearts make the best evil relics. San appears and lets Shuko know that despite the barrier standing, she can feel strange presences on the upper floors and suspects that the hired killers are here, but thinks it will be fine as Hugh and Jingo are up there to confront them, but Shuko still decides to go take a look. She withdraws her snake for later and tells Polina and Adriana to make sure that Kaname and Ryder don't escape, and just before leaving threatens Ruri, which scares her. Meanwhile, upstairs doing the battle, Kyugo has figured out that Hugh uses the Japanese quick-draw sword technique and creates a Kemetachi-like blade of wind by drawing his sword, and recalls how the previous attacks had destroyed his rifle but couldn't do anything to him, and the attack that he avoided didn't hit Shoya, and based on that thinks that Hugh's attacks must have a range that lies between 6 and 7 meters, so thinks to jump at Hugh and use his knife. Hugh realizes that Kyugo has figured out the reach of his attacks, but thinks Kyugo won't be able to do much despite that. Kyugo thinks that despite not being able to see the blade of wind, it must have a linear shape based on how his rifle was cut, and if there's a range in shape, then he should be able to dodge the attacks by moving unpredictably. Hugh continuously attacks Kyugo, but he stays on the move and dodges in, closing the distance between the two, and attacks Hugh, but he blocks the attack with his sword and compliments Kyugo at his impressive feat, but Kyugo replies that it's all because of his effort and talents. Hugh switches his method of attacks and swings his leg to kick Kyugo, forcing him to retreat. Hugh too is talented in the ways of martial arts. Kyugo had suspected that Hugh wasn't like the average Yakuza because the Aragami gang members are different from the rest. Shuya points out to Kyugo that he's having a tough time, at which Kyugo confirms if Shoya was able to defeat the Clobbering Mountain. Shoya sees Jingo rise up in front of him and gets an idea and tells Kyugo to switch with him. Kyugo is confused at first, but he quickly understands what Shuya means, and the two suddenly switch, which confuses their opponents, and Shoya immediately opens fire at Hugh, but he manages to dodge the attack. Meanwhile, Kyugo blocks Jingo's knives and closes up to him and manages to hit an attack. Jingo realizes that Kyugo is using Jeet Kune Do and turns into a shadow and moves towards Kyugo. Kyugo thinks that shadows must be formed by a person, and there is no way for a person to become a shadow on his own, so Jingo must be turning into a black liquid and moving around, and stabs at the black mass moving on the ground. His knives manage to dig into Jingo, forcing him to return to normal due to the pain. Kyugo's knives are made specifically to counter relics, so strange things shouldn't be a problem at all for him. Meanwhile, Shoya runs out of bullets in his fight, so asks Aramelina for a spare magazine, who creates it for him, allowing him to continue the fight. She also asks him if she should fix his arm, but he suggests doing it later as Hugh would be able to attack him while she fixes him. Shoya decides to test the special firearm level 1 skill in the skill tree and attacks at Hugh, but unfortunately all of his bullets miss him. But Shoya had taken a peek at Hugh's fighting style and realized that Hugh's sword was sheathed most of the time, which led him to believe that the magic must be in the scabbard, which he used to replenish the magic. This scabbard was the real target of Shoya's attacks. Kyogo's demon sees that both Kyogo and Shoya were keeping an eye at each other's opponents despite fighting the ones right in front of them, and thinks that they both were a bit too relaxed. Hugh says that his scabbard is made with Japanese ash, so it easily accumulates magic. Aramelina realizes that Hugh used the skin of Focalor, the demon of wind, and embedded it in the back of his hand and stored magic in the scabbard which was supplied to his sword. Hugh warns Shoya that even though he can't use the blade of the wind, they still haven't won. Meanwhile, Jingo still stands against Kyogo, at which Shoya decides to take them both to hell to show them how horrible it is. Meanwhile, Ryderk distracts Polina and Adriana, who are surprised at how good her regeneration skills are. The two are interested in her body, so move over to her, leaving Kaname alone, who uses this chance to pull out her boot knife and uses it to break free. She likes to tie her boots tight, which is why her captors didn't remove them. She uses her hidden weapon to swiftly take care of Polina and Adriana before the two have any chance to react. Hugh angrily says that even though he can't use the blade of wind anymore, Yakuza's worth is only measured after he fights using only a single dagger, and quickly charges at Shoya, who manages to hit Hugh multiple times, but Hugh doesn't cares about that and stays on the attack and strikes Shoya, and in his rage bites at Shoya's gun, who at this point just pulls the trigger, putting an end to Hugh. Meanwhile, Kyogo is able to sense that Jingo's magic is flowing out of him. He can sense this because a part of his soul is connected to the demon he's contracted with, which is the reason he can sense it. Kyogo has figured out that Jingo transforms into a shadow by mixing his blood with the blood of a demon, and as he's lost so much blood, he is unable to transform, and even if he manages to do so, all Kyogo needs to do is give chase and cut him down. However, turning into a shadow isn't the only trick that Jingo can play, and throws his knife at Kyogo, but the attack is ineffective. Kyogo charges at Jingo and hits his mark and strikes him. Jingo, seeing he has no chance to win, takes out a grenade and pulls its pin before dropping it onto the floor. Kyogo realizes that he only has 3 seconds before the grenade goes off, so he throws Jingo onto the grenade to absorb the explosion. The grenade explodes, but Kyogo only suffers minor injuries as he gets flung across the room. Seeing this, Shoya heads towards Kyogo as he's hurt badly. Meanwhile, in the basement, Kaname tries to free Ryderk, but fails and assumes that Araki is the only one who can free her. Kaname angrily tries to leave to fight Shoko, but Ryderk points out to her that she's unarmed and has no clothes. Ryderk suggests Kaname to search for a weapon first, as there should be many lying around on account of the place being a Yakuza office. Kaname asks Ryderk what they should do with Riri. Ryderk answers that Riri is related to Gomu Shoya, so they can't leave her like that. Meanwhile, on the 4th floor, the demons are healing both Shoya and Kyogo. Kyogo was less injured, so he moves first and tells Kyogo to follow him when he can move again. Aramelina talks to Shoya about saving Riri's life, but he cuts her off, saying he won't let his family get hurt in his second life and is determined to get her back no matter what. Aramelina warns Shoya that even though his bleeding has stopped, he's just as battle-wounded as Kyogo. Shoya is surprised at Aramelina being worried for him and points out that it's not very demon-like of her, which makes her heart skip a beat. Kyogo's demon heals him and has only removed the shards from Kyogo, so he won't be able to move for a while. Kyogo tries to force himself to move, but his demon stops him, saying he likes Kyogo's art, so doesn't want him to force himself and waste his life there. Meanwhile, Shoya heads towards his sister, but on the 3rd floor of the building he gets confronted by Shoko and San. Shoko lets Shoya know that she has orders from the Kanto group to kill him. Shoya gets mad at her for killing his family, but Shoko acts confused. Shoya shouts that he will torment her to death. San takes off her glasses and activates her violator powers. She is using the power of Sloman's demon Andromalius. Shoya thinks San is an underling, but she corrects him, saying she's a combat slave who will give her life for Shoko. Shoko is glad to have found her second demon of the day, which confuses Aramelina. Shoko explains she's talking about the evil relics she harvested from the demon she caught earlier and activates her powers as she wishes to do the same to Aramelina. Shoya laughs madly and tells Shuko that everything she just said will be done to her now. We see a brief flashback which confirms that Shuko herself was present at the moment Shoya's previous life was being ended. Shoya raises his weapon and attacks Shoko, but she manages to use her snakes to block all of the bullets. Meanwhile, in the basement, Kaname has found all her clothes except the skirt. Ryder lets her know that even though she was able to regenerate herself, the snakes are continuously draining her power, so she won't be able to give her the guardian kiss. Ryder gains strength through satisfying, which annoys Kaname, as usually Ryder is only interested in married women, but Kaname gives in and decides to satisfy Ryder. Meanwhile, on the third floor, Shoya is fighting Shuko, who keeps attacking him with her snakes, and all he can do is try to dodge her. Shoya thinks that Shuko is on a completely different level than his previous opponents. Shuko keeps attacking Shoya, who dodges the attacks and hides behind a desk. He uses this brief chance and attacks at her through the desk, but she still manages to block the bullets. Shoya realizes that he can't keep this up and needs to do something soon. Shuko, not wanting to drag the fight anymore, intensifies her attacks until one of her snake heads hits Shoya's thigh. At Kanto Group HQ in Shoto, Shibuya Ward, in the underground confinement cell, the Kanto Group president Yatsufusa Noriyuki is doing mad thing and is coating his food with drugs as if it was sugar. Daosetsu lets Yasufusa know that the ritual preparations are going well, at which Yasufusa asks for the old man and announces that he has violated and eaten the 300th woman and feels that the flesh and blood in his body has been replaced as he decapitates the last woman. Meanwhile, at the third floor of the Aragami gang office building, Shoya has been wounded and falls to the ground. Shuko finds all this too easy, at which San compliments her. The snakes are as fast as bullets, and even worse, Shoya has run out of ammo, increasing his problems. The snakes attack him again, but he manages to dodge them by using system of rolls he learned from President Damon. Aramelina provides Shoya with special ammo level 1 and reinforces the bullets with her magic and increases the rotation and muzzle velocity. Aramelina is only able to enhance 4 normal bullets but can manage to do 5 after a brief rest, so Shoya tells her to only enhance 4 bullets. Shoya attacks 4 times at Shuko, but she easily uses her snakes to grab the bullets and retaliates, but Shoya lifts a table and uses it to protect himself and Aramelina. Aramelina lets Shoya know that her magic isn't infinite on Earth, but even worse is that she's at her limit with normal bullets too. The snakes surprise the two by easily smashing through the table, forcing them to move. Shoya remembers when he was beaten by a man who told him that no matter what happens, if he wants to survive, then he will have to use his head. Aramelina gets worried about Shoya, but Shoya smiles, saying he wants to test something out. Shoya sits up and takes a single shot at San, but the snakes easily block it. Shoya manages to get away from the snake's attack, but his previous injury is making things worse for him. Shuko calls Shoya an amateur and says that pros are the one who kill and amateurs will die. Shoya calls Shuko an amateur, which makes her mad, at which she attacks him again and manages to hit him, causing him to fall on the ground. Shoya says that he's been watching a lot of pro wrestling shows not because he wanted to, but he has other reasons, but after some time realized that it's pretty good and wrestlers would always fall down, but it always felt good to see them get back right up. Shoya also watched some documentaries in addition to pro wrestling shows. Once he saw a documentary about snakes saying that snakes don't have eardrums, so instead, they process the vibrations that hit the surface of their body through their inner ears, so they perceive their surroundings by vibrations that transmit through their bones and muscles. Shoya points out that San hasn't been doing anything except standing like a statue, but when he tried to attack her, Shoko's snakes protected her, and as she doesn't look like a person who carries dead weight around, he thinks that San is there to support her and has been using her violator powers to see where Shoya is going to attack and relays the information to Shoko. Shoko is confused why Shoya is telling her all these things. Shoya says he's just buying some time so Aramelina can rest up. Shoko attacks Shoya with her snakes, but he turns over a table to protect himself, but the table gets smashed to bits by the snakes. Shuko uses a horde of snakes, but only one of them remains on the ground all the time, which relays any information perceived by vibrations throughout the ground, which is how Shoko has been able to block the attacks. Aramelina lifts Shoya into the air and prepares special ammo level 1 for him. Shoya attacks directly on the floor with the special ammo, which sends intense shockwaves overwhelming their opponents, severing their link. Shoya uses this opportunity to attack his 2 enemies and manages to finally land some hits. San falls to the ground, but Shuko is wounded but still standing. She pulls out her gun in anger, but it's all over for her as Kaname now appears on the scene wanting revenge. Shuko fires at Kanam, but because of Ryderk's guardian kiss, all the bullets don't harm her. Kanam closes in and using Savat continuously kicks Shoko, dropping her onto the ground. Shoya's injuries become too much for him, and he too falls down. Shoya is surprised that Kanam was in the building too, and asks if she had been caught because of the way she is looking, but she refuses to reply. Kanam asks if the girl downstairs is related to him, and he worriedly replies that she's his sister and asks if she's there. Kaname replies that his sister is fine. Kyoba now finally appears and him and Kaname ask each other to identify themselves, but Shoya says that it'll take too long to explain, but the important thing is that him and Kyugo saved her life. Kyugo says that the Aragami gang is a secretive group, so the HQ group probably isn't aware of Shoya's sister, but the police are afraid of leaks, so offers to take her home. Shoya questions leaving his sister to him, but Kyugo says that Shoya will owe him for this. They wonder what to do with Shuko, but they can't stay there for long. Luckily, Kaname knows a good place where they can lock Shuko, where they will interrogate her, and then finish her off when they know whatever they need. Shoya agrees but says that he must be the one who deals the final blow to Shuko, at which he receives no objections. Shoya reaches the basement and sees his sister tied up but otherwise fine. In a panicked voice, Riri asks who's there. Previously, Shoya had asked Aramelina to change his voice into his previous life's voice, so when he lifted his sister's ear cover and told her that someone will soon come to save her and there aren't any more enemies, she was unable to recognize that it was her brother who saved her. Shoya identifies himself as a passing hitman to his sister. Kanane looks at the unconscious Shoko and laughs maniacally as she thinks about all the ways to inflict pain on her in order to get her revenge. Shoya and the others arrive in front of Matsumoto Trading Company in Kabukicho District 2. Shoya confirms with Kanam if they can start torturing Shoko. Kanam gets angry at Shoya for not calling her Namasan and calls him stupid. Kyugo asks where they are, but Kanane says that it will be revealed soon. Their enemy is the largest designated criminal organization in Kanto, so they have to make sure that they interrogate Shuko someplace where nothing can leak. They enter the S&M club called as Iron Maiden, which gets customers from all sorts of places such as entertainment industries and huge corporations, and points out a few well-known people getting some special treatment. The club mistress Ibushi Haruki spots Kaname and gladly hugs her, thinking that she has finally decided to work at the club, but Kaname stops her, saying she shouldn't recruit innocent students. The others are a bit suspicious of Haruki, with Shoya warning that if anything leaks, then they will have to kill everyone. Kaname tells that they have a good reason to trust Haruki. Haruki has been helping Kaname with so many things that now there's no way for her to go back. She takes them to the cells and says that on the surface they are a S&M club, but have various other businesses running in the background and confine and interrogate those who mustn't be seen in public, and even get rid of the corpses, and promotes her services as the best in the industry. Kyugo understands that no one will suspect anything seeing a person tied up in an S&M club. Haruki takes them into the cell where Shuko is tied up. Kaname looks at Shuko and smiles like a villain as she's glad that soon Shoko will suffer. Shuko praises them for beating her, so as a reward tells them that the more dangerous a person is, the more quickly they need to be killed, as the risk grows exponentially the longer that person lives. Kana laughs as she sees the state Shoko has ended up in after underestimating her. Shoya tells Shuko that she doesn't look that dangerous, as Kanan enjoys kicking her, which angers her. Hyugo asks Haruki how will she extract the information, to which she tells him to not worry, saying she is a professional. Haruki will use the queens of her club to torment Shuko by constantly abusing her body. Hyugo isn't thrilled, as that torment seems too normal to him, but Haruki reveals that the true purpose of her method is to make sure that Shuko isn't able to sleep, and explains that the world record for longest time without sleep is 11 days, and once a person doesn't sleep for 3 days, their mental capacity will decrease significantly, and after 4 days won't be able to do simple calculations and be unable to differentiate between reality and dreams. She plans to use different tools such as ammonia solutions, ice water, and headphones playing loud noises. Hyogo is impressed with Haruki's plan and thinks that it'll be good.